Good day and welcome to JNN's Insight. I'm your host, Michael Sharp. On this program, we bring you insight into those matters impacting our country, and we bring you the story behind the story. Today, we look into aging and family planning. Joining us for that discussion is Dr. Tazhmoye Crawford, Director of Monitoring, Evaluation, and Research at the National Family Planning Board. Good day to you, ma'am.
And the same to you. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. It's our duty to get an insight. National Family Planning Board. What's the overall objective there? National Family Planning. Only if you plan, or if you don't plan, you still can come.
Well, the main thrust of the National Family Planning Board is population planning and development. And in 2013, it hasn't changed, but more has been added to it. Elements of the National HIV program under the Ministry of Health has been integrated into the National Family Planning Board. So what the National Family Planning Board now carries, in addition to population planning and development, are HIV prevention, HIV, STI, syphilis prevention arm, as well as the enabling environment and human rights.
That sounds like a logical connection because
Yes.
all of that can impact on the family life,
Of
HIV
course,
and
it does impact.
SDIs and
Yes.
what have you. So does it mean that there was an increase in staff and budget?
Oh yes, there was an increase in staff, an increase in everything. There was also a joining collaboration of activities to make things, to make the smooth transition. But however, just
Yes.
note that in the Ministry of Health, they maintain the treatment, care, and support arm,
Yes.
while the National Family Planning Board has the prevention arm and enabling environment and human rights. So when it comes to monitoring, evaluation, and research, that arm exists in both entities, in both the Ministry of Health and the National Family Planning Board.
I'm a little off here now that you have
Okay.
told me about that. I just want to know how this works, and that's what Insight is about.
Okay.
The National Family Planning Board includes the whole issue of HIV and other debilitating illnesses that can impact the family life and what have you, and to prevent it. But the Ministry of Health are the ones who naturally assist with the curative
Yeah.
measures. But yet, when the research is done, both sides do the research.
Depends on what research has been done, because there are mandates that we carry where health is concerned. So for example, we have like sex worker study, biobehavioral, that both Ministry of Health and the National Family Planning Board does. And I tell you something, coming out of that research over the years, we have seen where HIV prevalence among sex workers has dropped from 4.1 to 2.9, and recently there was another
When you
study.
say 4.9, are you talking percentage? Are you talking
Percentage.
millions? Or
No,
percentage?
sorry.
Okay, just want to be
Percentage.
clear.
Yes,
Want to be
yes.
clear.
And we have to be clear for our
Yes,
audience too. Yes.
4.9 to 2.1.
Yes, and
Oh,
then
that's a
no,
massive-
4.1 to 2.9, and now
4.1 to 2.9.
Right,
That's
and now
still
we-
appreciable. Is it?
absolutely.
Yes,
And here
2.9.
is another good news. In a recent sex worker study, it is now at 2.
Okay, so we've gone rid of the
It,
0.9.
yes, and
It's
we
now at 2.
absolutely.
Just for clarification, you call sex workers. Who are sex workers?
Persons who transact sex.
Okay. you're
Female,
talking-
let me say female sex workers.
Females.
Yes, female sex workers.
Oh, so we haven't gone to the men sex workers.
No. But in terms of men, there have been studies regarding men who have sex with men, and there are also studies regarding inmates. Recently, the National Family Planning Board has gone into the correctional facilities.
Remember that controversy?
Yeah. So they are conducting studies in relation to HIV, syphilis, and other STIs. Data has just been gathered, so there is no finding as yet.
Was there a point, and I interview as the Lord leads. Was there a point they were talking about condom in prisons, giving prisoners condoms? Is that on? Is that?
That was some years ago, but we would not breach the law in any shape or form. So we are very stick-to-itive where the law of the land is concerned.
So that's not allowed.
Oh, no.
That's not allowed. Okay, I would just want to see if there's any reduction
It's still
there
considered a
because-
contraband, so we
Yes.
don't.
Oh, that's considered contraband.
Yes.
Okay. Well, okay. There was a time when most of us would hear two is better than too many. We haven't heard that in recent times for a good while now. What is the population size? Are we on target with our population size that we have to have some kind of a goal as it relates to that?
Okay, so let me speak to data coming from findings from the Reproductive Health Survey, because without a survey, you really cannot tell, you cannot accurately say what is. So the last Reproductive Health Survey was done in 2008, and it showed that we are at 2.4 fertility rate, okay, which is good. It's not bad, it's good. And for adolescent, it's 72 per 1,000, which is too high. Now, we are hoping to have another reproductive health survey very soon, because we depend on that survey to guide the government in terms of decision making regarding sexual and reproductive health and other related matters, gender-based violence and maternal health, child health, and you name it, that which runs across the spectrum of sexual and reproductive health. However, let me point out that a World Bank Group report which was done showed that we are currently at 61 per 1,000 fertility rate for adolescents.
But
Now,
wasn't it 72?
it was 72. Our survey shows 72.
Yes.
Now, a World Bank Group, which has done basically like a trend analysis.
Yes.
So with a trend analysis, it's like when you look, because we have been doing reproductive health survey from 1975. So, and religiously, this is the first time that there is a big gap in the survey not being done. So what that group has done, basically done a trend analysis to see like a predictive format, where would we be now if we were to do a survey?
Yes.
So it shows 61 point, and this is estimation, 61 per 1,000. Now the National Family Planning Board, under the auspice of the International Development Bank, has been targeting parishes. Actually, 5 parishes have been targeted that shows high pregnancy rate among adolescents, and currently that is being pursued. The parishes are Kingston, St. Andrew, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, Westmoreland. Yeah, I think I got all of them there.
You mentioned that 72%. For the purpose of this
Per
conversation,
1,000.
who are adolescents? What's the age?
Adolescent under the WHO, thus the World Health Organization, is defined as persons that range between 10 to 19 years.
10 to 19.
Yes.
And we're seeing 72% based on our analysis,
72
61%
per 1,000.
per 1,000.
Yes.
Yes. And some 61% based
Per
on
1,000,
WHO.
right,
Per
based on
1,000.
World Bank Group, yes.
What is said to be a good, healthy number in that group?
It's good that you asked that question, because when an analysis was done using the RHS, and it showed that if a girl,
Using the?
reproductive health survey,
Okay, me and you today.
so reproductive health survey hearing will be referred to as the RHS.
Okay.
Right, so it's an acronym. So if a girl were to have 0 to 9 years of schooling, then fertility rate and birth rate would be very high, like 140 birth rate.
Help me out with that.
Right.
If a girl is to have 0 to
9 years of schooling. Right.
Yes.
Fertility rate. So listen, follow me here.
Yes.
So there's a correlation between years of schooling and birth rate and fertility rate. Okay? So your likelihood of completing your education and not getting pregnant, yes? Would mean that there's less fertility rate or birth rate among adolescents. If a girl were to complete, say, more than or 13 years of schooling, we're looking at birth rate to be 12 and fertility rate to be 1.6 per 1,000.
Let me see if I can get around all of these numbers, because you have to retain these things. Are you saying that the more educated a girl is, the less likely she to become pregnant.
Exactly.
That's what you're
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, I'll tell you,
Yes.
I'll work through these. We're going to take our
Yes.
first break on Insight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Insight. We're discussing aging and family planning, and we have Dr. Crawford in house with us this day. And in terms of the overall goals and ambitions and of the National Family Plan, are they being met? Is a struggle meeting them? What are these goals, and are you meeting them?
Like everything else, there are challenges, but I am pleased to say that we have been achieving a lot. Like, for example, recently we managed to be at the final stage of the drafting of an HIV policy. And that HIV policy actually looks at where people living with HIV and other members of the population can actually access universal health care and support. Yes, and also to the possibility of reducing any new infection. So the policy now is at its final draft stage to be submitted to the Ministry of Health for approval and then on to Cabinet for final approval.
Does it address the issue of HIV in the workplace?
Absolutely, it's addressed a wide spectrum of HIV.
Yes, and what is that policy supposed to do? I mean, will it just be placed on a desk somewhere?
Absolutely not this time. Over 1,000 persons were engaged in consultancy to give us some feel as to how they perceive the response to be, and that helped to make the policy more robust than if there wasn't any consultation taken place at all.
I've looked at some of the notes and see where family planning boards, I suspect all over the world, speak to the number of pregnancies they were able to, unwanted pregnancies they were able to prevent. How do you measure that?
Well, that would be measured through the survey, and the survey, for updated figures, the survey hasn't happened yet. Hopefully it will happen soon. Yes. But we see where we have been making progress. Recently we have strengthened the contraceptive logistic management information system island-wide, because we had noticed some challenges in regarding the storage and recording of information and so on. And so we were able to add a better face to the whole contraceptive logistic model through doing surveys, disseminating that findings throughout healthcare providers, throughout the island with healthcare providers at the table. We were able to revise the contraceptive register and the logbook. Because when you're taking in information, recording information that is of such national importance, it needs to be extremely accurate, because it's based on this information where decisions are made. We had also conducted training looking at contraceptive forecasting models and techniques with healthcare providers, so that everybody can get it right and that they can adhere to a set standard. Subsequently, we had done an evaluation to see if capacity was built and to see if there has been adherence to these standards, and also to see if, even though there have been adherence, if it is that there has been improvement in the system, and if stock out of contraceptive has been reduced as a result of. And so far, we are there on top of things, So the National Family Planning Board has been working wonders. Let me say kudos to those who came up with this initiative many years ago, perhaps before you and I were born. and out of that came an Act of Parliament, 1970. Yes. And we have been abiding under the tenets of that legislation, and subsequently have spread our wings.
So the National Family is a statutory body?
It's a statutory body under the Ministry of Health.
Means you have to find your own money?
Government funded. We also have projects that comes from international donor partners under whose auspice we operate. Most of our HIV operation is from project funding. Yes.
The whole issue of abortion is now up again in the public domain. Does the National Family Planning Board play any role in that, vis-a-vis counseling, vis-a-vis anything having to do with, abortion?
We have a counseling arm at the National Family Planning Board that looks at HIV, pregnancy, and other sexual and reproductive health matters. The topic of abortion is a very sticky one, as you know, under the Offense Against the Person Act. It is against the law. We do not operate under anything to do with that subject matter.
Okay, it's against the law to have an abortion in Jamaica?
If you look at the Offense Against the Person Act of Jamaica, it speaks to it.
So I suspect it's an offense against the unborn. Consider human being. Just how I transition this program, I have to want to find out about the person behind all of this, you. From whence did you come? Where were you born? How did you land up here? What prepared you in life for this, to be doing what you're doing now?
Okay, so
tell us about yourself and the biography.
Okay, so I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and I grew up in quite a number of parishes. Yes, because my parents had moved around a bit, and but I had Okay, so the matter of sexual and reproductive health has always interested me.
You haven't finished the autobiography thing. Which school, people want to know which clan you were in, which tribe, what's your alma mater?
Okay, I went to, let me name my favorite school,
Carefully.
wait a bit all age in the parish of Trelawney. It's my favorite school because it has prepared me for where I am today. Sometimes people discount all age schools, but we had the best teachers, hopefully. Some of them would have retired now, but some are still there. And I find that the students who attend that school tend to be very solid, even though they may have gone on to other schools like Knox, Homewood, and William Knibb. But it is so. Nowadays, you hear Minister of Education speaking about the possibility of using music to teach. We had that.
Okay.
We had that. Almost everything that persons are saying, we need to have this for the kids. We had that. So I was blessed to be exposed to that. So from early, I had insight as to what it is that I wanted to be and what it is that I wanted to research.
No, wait a bit. Wait a bit. I know
the
that's
school.
Wait a bit. I'm using that as a point.
Yeah.
After you left, wait a bit. Where did you get your, tertiary education and all that?
Okay, so after I left Wait a Bit, I went to a school called Albertown. That's in Trelawney as well. It was different. Most of the things that I learned at Albertown, I had already covered them at Wait a Bit. But they had the teachers I encountered at Albertown were really good teachers as well. I find that the teachers in the rural parishes tend to be very, very insightful and go beyond the call of duty without much complaint.
You're just pushing the country thing on a town man. After Albertown, where did you go?
So I went to a school called Elim Agricultural School. That's in St. Elizabeth. Because I'm an old farmer. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it had agriculture was my main focus back then. And I was very good at animal husbandry.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I used to jump over fences in my water boot and coverall and milk cows and take cows out to pasture. Okay. It made me had an appreciation for the bovine species and other animals.
Oh, she's talking about the cows. Bovine species. The cows, okay?
But I must tell you this. Out of that came the health side of me. Because I am able to twin social science My degrees are in social science, not in health. But because of my exposure to agriculture, I'm able to twin the health side of things with the social side of things.
I'm glad you put it that way. I was about
Yeah.
to come at you and say, "Oh, you're able to twin the health side of social science, because social science is everything." At the tertiary education, where did you go? Were a UE type? Did you go away? What happened?
Okay, so I went to the University of Technology first, and I got a very solid foundation there as well. I was very fortunate in that regard. And then I went to the University of the West Indies, where I did my master's, and then I went to the University of the Caribbean, where I did my doctorate.
Okay, all
Yes.
right, very well. So how did all of that prepare you for what you're doing now? Because that's the transition I'm making.
Okay, foundation is the key. Okay, one of the gaps that I find with some individuals is not being able to make linkages, right? So at the National Family Planning, and even before going to the National Family Planning Board, I was in the Ministry of Health. So the National Family Planning Board was a promotion for me from my post, so I went there on secondment, right? So when you can inextricably link things, it's like it creates an insight that other persons don't see, right? So my foundation from Wait a Bit, and then leading up to university level, up to the International University of the Caribbean, has actually prepared me for this journey. In addition to that, I mean, let's not think just like it's just classroom. I have had the privilege while being at the University of the West Indies to go to conferences overseas, international conferences. My publications, my academic publications actually also started from the University of the West Indies with other professors joining me in research. So I have approximately 40 international publications in peer-reviewed journals. And these are not just getting out a research there and publish them, because you can get out anything and publish. But the thing is, what value will this research have? You remember yesterday when we were, day before yesterday, we were speaking about aging, the research on aging, and you could see the inextricably linkage with aging, chronic illness, sexual and reproductive health, and lifestyle. Many persons don't look at that, so it does prepare me.
And what I tried to do was to create the linkages between where you came from and what you're doing now.
Yes.
So I have another link to make, but that's when we return on Insight. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back to JNN's Insight. If you're just joining, we are discussing aging. Once you were born, it's a topic you should listen to. And family planning, with Director of Monitoring, Evaluation and Research at the National Family Planning Board, Dr. Tazhmoye Crawford. We're going to make a segue, as we say, or go make a linkage now to aging. You have done some research work on aging. Tell us about that. What was that all about? What inspired that?
Okay. What inspired that is because I've heard on quite a number of occasions, and I've also observed myself, where persons of the aging community has been, the elderly community, I should say, has been ignored. You notice I said elderly and not aging because we're all aging, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Nice
So
definition.
they have been ignored on many levels. I mean, there are persons who have done significant work. I mean, local persons who have done significant work in this area, like, for example, Professor Eldemire Scherer and Dr. Joan Rawlings. But how much of that work has been tied into policy decision makings, program interventions, and so on? Because we do not want to, we want to make an impact as scholars, right? So I said, let me take it a little further and hear the voices of the elderly. What do they have to say? So it's a matter of going beyond the numbers. So year before last, when the Ministry of Health had its its national research conference, which it does has every year, in November to be specific, I had the opportunity of my paper being accepted for oral presentation, and so this piece on life after 10, a phenomenological analysis, was presented by me, and it was very well received. Subsequently, I was invited by the Southern Regional Health Authority to sit at their planning table regarding their therapeutic park, which is an initiative, yes, an initiative that does not just involve the elderly, but a wide spectrum of persons, with the focus being reduction of chronic illness or prevention of chronic illness. So I said to myself, why not put it out there for others to see? Why keep it to myself? And so the National Family Planning Board, which I had presented at the conference, my executive director, Miss Lovett Byfield, supported me on this. She vetted the work to make sure that it was in keeping with international journal acceptance, and also, you know, a fee had to be paid for this to be published. So it was published in the International Journal of Healthcare Sciences and National Family Planning Board, thanks to Ms. Byfield, who has supported this in that regard.
How did you go about this in terms of getting that data, speaking to them, hearing the voices beyond the numbers, as you put it? What, you know, the cohorts, what ages you dealt with, people from where?
Okay, so these persons were from both rural and urban Jamaica. They were within the age cohort of 78 to 104 years old.
78?
Yes, to 104. And as you know, it's a qualitative study. So
make the distinction for me between a qualitative study and a quantitative study.
Okay, so in a nutshell, quantitative looks at figures, count. How many persons said what, how many people there. Now, qualitative explain beyond the figures, why is it that this is happening? The how, the why, the what, the when, the where. Okay. Yes.
Okay. And your study is qualitative study.
So when I said phenomenological analysis, in a nutshell, that is just looking at the experiences and how those experiences have been interpreted.
Okay. And would you suggest that these interpretation represent another group, perhaps of like-minded persons, but you don't have to get to them through this person?
I would say that
it represents a constituency, if you may have thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look around us, we see where even the youths, not very respectful of the elderly. I think people need to be culturalized to respect those who were here before us. Because believe it or not, they have in some shape or form paved the way to allow us to be. Yes.
And how you treat the elderly will suggest how you like to be treated when you become
old. But do they think about that?
No. It's not immediate.
Another thing that is important, the youths, starting from very young, needs to understand the importance of aging. If you notice in my research how the elderly spoke about being frightened sometimes by the physiological changes which were unexpected, you know, nobody...
We're going to break that down again. Physiological, meaning what?
What's happening in your body?
Okay.
You know, what you feel on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Now, what you eat and your lifestyle plays a great role in how you age.
Stop right there. In other words, you prepare yourself.
Absolutely.
How well you handle your old age,
yes.
your dotage.
Yes.
I think it's another term for that.
Okay.
Is dependent on what you do when you were young.
Absolutely, because not everything has to do with gene, you know. Yes, not everything has to do with gene, you know. A lot has to do with lifestyle, you know, our nutrition, you know, how we go about living, our environment. So if persons can be culturalized to think that I need to do better in my everyday living. And you have even the children being watchdogs. I remembered a child told me when he was in grade 3, he said, you know, my teacher said I must not eat any more bagged juice. You know, that was many years ago. You know, I offered to buy the child a bag juice.
Yeah.
He said, no, my teacher told me not to eat any more bag juice.
Okay.
I must drink water and I must eat fruits. Yes,
very
and that
right.
was over 20 years ago.
There you go.
So if we can have our children being watchdogs, you know, then it will help the adults,
Yes.
you know, to get on with the program.
Let's get now into your research somewhat. What are the elderly saying that we should be mindful of? What's their fears? What is it that they're collectively they're saying?
Okay, so some of them complain about feeling lonely.
Feeling lonely.
Yes, some of them are afraid of paralysis. They're afraid of their money being taken away even by loved ones, because, you know, I remember one respondent said everybody knows that the elderly is slow, and sometimes you have to keep an eye out for the youths because they are swift. You know, they will rob you, even your very own. And there are those who are afraid of death. What you find is that people may put a timeline. Oh, I don't mind living until I'm 70, but by the time they reach 65, oh, you know, I could live until I'm 75, you know, and they want to expand it a little more.
Extending their
Exactly.
their timeline.
And there were a few of them who were not afraid of anything at all, not even death. That was the 104-year-old who is still alive, and the 95 years old who is now 96. Yeah.
They have come to terms.
Absolutely. And I must say that the 104-year-old only has glaucoma and is blind as a result thereof, doesn't exercise because she's afraid of falling,
Yes.
but she said, oh, I am already slim and sexy, so what's the problem? Yes. And the 95-year-old doesn't do any exercise at all, just sit at home, and he has absolutely no chronic illness.
Yes.
None whatsoever.
Yes.
But then there were those in my study, as you would have seen, who had chronic illnesses. It did not stop them, not all of them, of course, but it did not stop some of them to engage in sexual intercourse with their partners.
At
Yes.
these ages, well,
Yes.
certainly not 104.
Oh no, the 104 person had a child who had predeceased her, and she has never had a partner since after having that child.
Whoa.
Yes, yes.
Okay, she's kept herself for something else.
Yes,
The issue of trust,
yes,
what comes out at me as it
Yeah.
relates to the financials.
yes.
Because chances are, the older you get, you have all the money.
Mm-hmm.
You would have saved something,
Yes,
assuming.
yes.
How can they cope with that? Because that's real. You might have some family members, they love you dearly, but they would mind to see you go so they can benefit from what you had. Is that the thinking?
Well, what the persons who had expressed feeling a sense of insecurity that, hey, we are slow and the younger generation is swift, and remember I said that earlier, they are mostly the ones who, but be mindful that the study had 6 of them being dependent on their children and grandchildren, and the other 4 actually were fully dependent, you know, get around on their own. Some of them were still working at the time of the interview, because what they said is that it's like you cannot save enough because of inflation. You know, those in the home who are also dependent on some of the elderly ones, they said sometimes there are conflict in the homes. You know, they think that their children should have been living on their own and not be fighting.
So it's like their home that the kids are still
Absolutely.
there. They didn't fly the coop.
Exactly. Don't fight in my home. I don't want any conflict in my home, not at this stage of my life. You know, so that was a concern. Not so much the money, but, you know, they want peace. Domestic dispute, you know. So, and they're also not trusting of partners, potential partners who may come into their lives, you know, also for financial reasons and reasons that...
Is the more the men or the women who have greater the fear that the men?
I had more women in my study than men.
Okay.
So these were mainly the women speaking.
Fearing that the man who is coming on.
Yes, may become abusive.
Okay, 'cause
You
she
know,
doesn't know much.
absolutely, and especially when they did not have abusive partners before. You know, so that is a concern. Another concern was regarding social exclusion, where, for example, those who were married to persons who were like icon related and who used to get invitations to go out there, here and there. After that person dies, those invitation is no longer forthcoming. And so they would like to go out, but not by themselves. They would want to be escorted. And even Rawlings in her work spoke about that. And so I could identify that in my results.
Yes.
But
So they realized that perhaps they were an annex.
they realize now that they appear to have been an annex, which is unfortunate.
So help me with the one that I hear most older folks have a problem with, and certainly something that I know I would have a problem with.
Yeah.
Paralysis.
Yes.
What's happening with that?
Okay, so there were those who had osteoarthritis, and they exercised. And they said that they have seen improvement where pain has been significantly reduced. Let me tell you something about this exercise. This exercise, most of them spoke about coming from the Minister of Health, Jamaica Move Initiative, right? They said that it had encouraged them, it had motivated them to exercise. And what motivated them even more was that when they saw that the exercise was resulting in their blood sugar being controlled, blood pressure being controlled, and pain being reduced for those who had chronic arthritis.
So they were moving with Jamaica.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they also said that it built their confidence. It made them, one lady said, you know, it made me feel much younger. You know, my sexual prowess has been more advanced, and I have no I have no intention of stopping anytime soon, you know. So the exercises actually exudes their level of confidence, you know, not just in sexual matters, but overall being a person. Because even those who were not interested in having a partner or having sex or even talking about it, they said that they have seen some benefit to the exercise as well.
Very well. We must all go out and exercise. We'll be right back on Insights. Welcome back to Insight. Dr. Crawford is in the house, so we're talking about the elderly, aging as well. And of course, we dealt with the National Family Planning Board issues. She did a research, a qualitative research. She spoke to elderly folks, and she put it in a research document. Here's a big question now. So what? So what? What all of these findings going to do to anybody?
Okay, very good question, Michael. So what? We need to make sure that there is strengthening of our policies when it comes to persons of the elderly community. They must not be left behind. Remember, that's one of the slogans of our Sustainable Development Goals, leave no one behind. I am not saying that we are leaving persons behind, but more needs to be seen and felt, right? One of the things that the elderly was concerned about is that when they reach retirement, there is no counseling for them.
There is no
counseling for them to prepare them for that next stage. Remember, at various stages of our lives, we become uncertain. So we become uncertain when we leave high school and we go into the workplace. Okay?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. So you have been working all your life and you have interacted with a myriad of number of persons, and you're going home to sit down and do what? I mean, some are brought back on contract, but even if you're brought back on contract, it's not the same in terms of your terms.
Touch and go.
Absolutely,
Yes.
right? So they call for counseling at that level. So I am saying that if it is that there is a policy regarding counseling persons before they go on retirement, then that policy needs to be seen and felt by all.
Okay, all right. I catch you right there. You're saying the so what should mean that we should change our policies to ensure that persons who are entering after retirement into the elderly class, if you may, are front and center as well.
Yeah.
So that we can ensure that the policies, the budgets that guides private and public sector address that aging population, that elderly group. That's what you're saying.
Yes, if a policy exists, you may want to tweak it to accommodate and to make it be more felt. If a policy does not exist, you may need to install one.
Yes.
Yes. Another thing is research in this regard needs to be strengthened. We need to be able to see an intimacy between policy and research so as to strengthen the policy, research, and program interface platform.
Explain that. Give me what that means.
So
in
let's
English.
say, okay, so this research was done, and other research has been done, looking at various things and various linkages. These findings should be able to inform the policy that is going to be installed or is going to be developed. Yes. Okay, so that's one of the linkage. If it is that after looking at the findings from these research, you find that more needs to be done, like in my case, that was how I came. When I look at other person's research, I said, why not do a qualitative one, linking chronic illness with sexual and reproductive health and lifestyle and very blah, blah, the topic that has been so much ignored. Yes. Okay? So more research could be done, or even a survey could be done, considering this community, so that greater decisions can be made. Because without evidence-based information, you really can't make sound decisions.
That's right.
So to answer, these are what would answer your so what questions. Moving forward, let us use the findings from this research and from other research that has been done to strengthen the policy program and further research interface.
Who has that remit? Is it the Ministry of Health or your department that has that remit to, or is it cabinet, or is it somewhere that collates this? Because the fear is that research will come on top of research, and then it will go into file 13 of the research draw. Is there a movement? Is there someone apart from yourself who would guide this? Where does it go? Help us here.
Okay, so it's multi-sectoral. It's not just health-based. Remember, in this piece of work here, one of the things that came out also is how the elderly have been treated, those who commute. So, for example, Ministry of Transport may see where they could do further research in terms of their response to the elderly, those who commute, right? Another ministry, for example, I can't think of one right now, technology, because technology was also one of the things that came out in this paper, could see where they could more accommodate or maybe expand research to say, okay, so this was a finding. Let us do a research to see how, what more we can gather where this community is concerned, so that we could enhance our service delivery.
Help me with one. There's one that sticks out in my mind.
Yes.
Because once you become older, you tend to feel pain.
Yeah.
You become more appreciative of the disabled community.
Yes.
And therefore you would want to have ramps, buses that lower
Yes.
to meet you, like other first world countries.
Yes.
But the challenge I have, the thing that bothers me is that not unless there's somebody with that type of insight, that type of blessing, if you may, then it will just go astray.
I agree with you. And so our leaders and us as government, because the people are the government, right?
Yes, yes.
Needs to pay attention and do what we can in that falls under our remit, or even go beyond the call of duty. Our clinics have been, some of our clinics and centers of excellence, as we call them, have been fashioned to suit this kind of need for not just the elderly, but members of the disabled community. In terms of the transportation, I have not seen any. I don't know if it exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I am not seeing the lowering of the ramps on any public transportation to accommodate persons of the elderly and disabled community. So that is something that those who are in charge of that purview could take into consideration going forward. Yes, we talk about limited resources or the lack thereof, but sometimes we have to make ourselves be the resources in order to make things done,
Yeah.
you know?
Help me for the remaining portion of this program. I want to deal with some specifics.
Yes.
We will hope that others will come and look at the research and find out how they can make their grouping better for it. But immediately, as we interface with the elderly out there in the real world, what are some of the values that we should bring back? What are some of the things we should do? Because one of the things you mentioned to me is that the elderly wants to be reassured. How the behavior, how should we in the public treat the elderly to show that we have class?
Okay. I remember when I was younger, and when I said younger, I mean in my 20s, so it wasn't far back then.
Yes, yes.
When an elderly person or a pregnant person entered the bank or a disabled person, they were immediately escorted by the security to the front of the line. I don't see that happening anymore. Or when you go into a fast food place or a store, you know, that sells, where you have to form a line, I don't see that happening anymore. There are many times when I have to bring it to the attention of the supervisor. Here is an elderly person, or here is a pregnant woman, or a woman with a baby, or a disabled person. We need to go back to that space where we become sensitive to persons who have needs. Now, in the study, they talk about the waiting time at the healthcare facilities.
Yeah.
There were some of those who said, I don't mind once I get through and once the service is of, you know,
Yes.
top-notch
Yes.
customer care. A concern which they had too was the how they are communicated to by the healthcare professionals. They said that there were times when they were not given enough information or enough explanation regarding the changes that they were going through, and they got the feeling that persons were just waiting for them to exit this world.
Yes.
But then they also, and this is one of the things that I appreciated with the respondents, they did not ignore the improvements that they were seeing. They said there were times when they were given prescriptions and nothing was explained and you couldn't ask any question. They said now they are able to ask questions. What is this prescription for? I know I came to you about such and such a matter, and the doctor would stop and explain to them. So they are seeing that improvement. So where persons know within themselves as healthcare providers that they are not sufficiently catering to the needs of persons of this community, I think they need to become more sensitive, because at the end of the day, we are all God's creation, we are all human beings, and we need to be treated with utmost care, especially when we go to a care facility.
Yes. Help me, because the challenge has reached me now as it relates to how you take care of the elderly, but it's depending on different people in different jurisdictions, different customer service areas, and what have you. Should this not be a matter of our curriculum in a class?
As I said before, it should start from the youths. But I agree with you, make it a part of the curriculum. When I was younger, they had this thing called civics.
Yes.
I don't see that anymore. And the personal touch, I used to see children helping the elderly to cross the road, or if something fell from them. Now, it's a whole different landscape.
Yeah, nowadays, it's a big thing when you see a policeman carrying across the elderly. That should be commonplace.
It should be commonplace.
That shouldn't be a big thing.
Exactly.
You know, so it's so rare that
yes,
we
I have seen, and this is quite disturbing, I have seen persons helping other persons to cross the street, and motorists are honking their horns really loud. I think that the ministry that is in charge of transportation should should stop these motorists from honking their horns, even in zones that are supposed to be quiet, like hospitals and schools. The honking of the horns, driving down on people as if you want to hit them down, and sometimes they do hit them, you know.
Yes.
You know, so maybe that was not the intention, but the reflex between getting up off the brake and you know, may not be very, you know,
Yes.
so you end up hitting the person. So we need to be more sensitized regarding the elderly, starting from the youth, and there also needs to be sanctions against persons who abuse these persons, both the elderly and the... Well, nobody should be abused. But remember, the elderly have paved the way for us, and they should be respected. And I hope that if and when I become, you know, an elderly person and become slow, hopefully not, I could, this research and other research by then would have changed the landscape in a positive way so that I can benefit and the youngster over there can benefit and others who are coming up can benefit. But I am looking forward to positive things, you know, where this is concerned.
I want to thank you so much. That was Dr. Tazhmoye Crawford, Director of Monitoring, Evaluation and Research of the National Family Planning Board, and this is where we end Insight for today. But do join us again next week when we bring you more insight into those issues that impact our country and its people. Special thanks to our guests and also to our viewers. Thanks also to our editorial and production teams. I've been your host, Michael Sharp. Until next time.